Right, today I shall be talking briefly about the hive mind of Homo Sapiens. Now, there's a guy called Texarkana who had a blog, and he was eventually warned off that blog by the so-called powers that be, and he shut it down and sort of went quietly disappeared. He had some interesting articles. There are some archived aspects of his blog. And one of the things that he mentioned, and I haven't sort of read enough myself and researched it enough myself to know the exact details of why and how it all came about, but he had this theory that Neanderthal man was essentially a much more individualistic and evolved type of person than Homo Sapiens or Cro-Magnum. And basically what happened, he says, the Homo Sapiens hive mind, they're all conforming to everything, they all do the same thing, they all tick the same boxes. And those guys basically took over and wiped out the Neanderthals. And the reason they could do that is because the Neanderthals were more individualistic, more sort of ritualistic, and more in tune, in his opinion, with the world/universe and so on. Now, this would not be the first time that a society of humans got wiped out by a lower, shall we say, what I would call spiritually and intellectually less evolved group of people. In fact, it's invariably pretty much what happens. Once a society becomes pretty evolved, invariably the troglodytes on the globe come and eat them alive. It's a sort of Eloy Morlock thing, if you've ever read H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. Now the thing is, do I think that theory is valid? Yes, I actually happen to do think it's valid on the basis that Neanderthal man had a larger cranium and a larger brain than Homo sapiens. It's also a fact that those of us that still have Neanderthal genes in our DNA are slightly different from those who don't. And it's very interesting, and I suggest you look into it yourself, because nothing is quite as interesting as when you figure stuff out on your own. And being a partial Neanderthal myself, I urge you to do that. Be an individual, actually figure shit out for yourself. Don't just swallow everything that comes along. And it is, again, as Catholics, we're now a minority on the planet, certainly as any kind of the fake church and religions like nominal Catholics, Bergoglian, Norcos, Novus Orchians are not Catholics, they're Churchians or Satanists. Protestants, again, are not really Christian, they're just schismatics, again, Orthodox, less schismatic than the others, but still schismatic and so on. And if you look at the approach of Catholics, actual Catholics, to life, the world, and everything, compared to the average Protestant, it's very clear that the sense of imagination, of wonder, of paradox, of interest, of sheer curiosity is far lower in the Protestant denominations. They're more a box-ticking, hive mind type of mentality. But it's really interesting, considering that DNA difference and so on, it's quite interesting when I consider the fact that I've observed this throughout my life. And again, if you go into the social sexual hierarchy and you look into, why sigmas are sigmas and whatever, and, like Vox says, it comes from, damage probably early on or not a particularly good situation or whatever. But regardless of that, the fact is that I noticed this since I was a child, that I'm doing my own thing, and my own thing seems to be doing quite well, and I'm happy. And along comes some other idiot who's not doing well, not happy, or doing well superficially, but actually not happy in themselves. And they start to say, oh, you should do it this way. Oh, you should do it that way. And I'm like, why don't you just fuck off and let me do what I want to do the way I want to do it? Works for me. You go do whatever you want to do. And as soon as you say that, they lose it. Whether they show it or not is a different thing, but they lose it. They can't stand the fact that somebody else is doing their own thing and achieving a higher degree of success, happiness, inner peace, whatever you want to call it, whatever success means to you, than they clearly have. And then they want to kind of wreck it. And it's the 7 sins, right? It's envy, jealousy, that sort of thing. And where does it come from? Where does it come from? Because honestly, if I'm just, walking along and I see a guy that's, I'm just going to make an analogy, right? The point of analogies, by the way, is to make extreme examples that are easy to understand, because the example might be extreme, but the process is the same. It's like if a guy bumps you into that. I was just using this example the other day with my wife, actually. If somebody bumps into you in the street, steps on your foot and goes, "Oh, I'm sorry," most people will just be like, "Yeah, don't worry about it, it's fine." And why? Because he bumped into you, you saw in his face that he genuinely was sorry, that it was an accident, that was it. Same situation, but he runs over your kid and kills him because his brakes failed, he wasn't paying attention, he was looking somewhere else, he was on his phone. Are you going to be okay with them just saying, "Oh, sorry"? No, you're not. Because forgiveness is dependent on actual atonement, on repentance, on true repentance. And somebody who's just killed your kid just saying, "I'm sorry," doesn't quite cut it. And everybody's different. We all have different levels. And some of us, martyrs, are willing to say, even if he is not sorry, I forgive them because of my belief in Christ and so on. Those people are, to me, those guys are like magicians. I don't understand that. I understand the concept of being forgiven as you forgive others. I'm comfortable with that concept. And I know that means there's some purgatory coming my way, heavy purgatory coming my way. But it is what it is. And similarly, where does it come from? This level of envy where if you see somebody doing well, they're, you want to tear them down or bring them down to your level. I don't have that. I've genuinely never had that. If I'm just walking along and I see a guy that's like, built his own yacht out of 3 trees and he's sailing all around the world, fishing, living well, and having 5 kids on his random weird yacht that he managed to build with just 3 trees that his whole family lives on happily, and he's genuinely, a happy guy and well-read, well-educated, and he knows a whole bunch of stuff that I don't know because he's done that, and I meet him, I would be like, "Wow, man, how'd you do that? Can you teach me? Show me, how did you do that giant boat and you have such a happy family with just 3 trees and a penknife? Fuck, man, I want to learn how to do that. I'll just watch. If I can't talk to him, if I would try and learn. I would be like, whatever that guy's doing, I want to try and emulate some of that at least, I've never felt envious or jealous of anybody, genuinely. It's not I've got many faults, but I've never had that as one of my flaws. And I genuinely don't understand it as a personal thing that I could experience. I do understand it and I do recognize it very quickly in others because I've been exposed to it a lot. And that's also why I'm very comfortable with the saying NPAI. Most people are idiots. And unfortunately, it's a fact. But the hive mind, you got to be always careful of that. And you got to be careful because it comes from the most unexpected places, including so-called actual Catholics. You might be in a little Catholic community and you've just figured out how to avoid certain things, or do your little homestead in a nice way. It doesn't cost money, that you're happy, and you've discovered that going to live in Madagascar is the best option because nobody's going to force vaccines on you and you can own machine guns, whatever. Again, I'm just making a stupid example. And you'll find that if you share that with someone, you're going to get jumped on by all the people that are unhappy, that don't want to move to Madagascar, that don't know how to move to Madagascar, that maybe don't have the possibility to move to Madagascar, that are scared of machine guns, not because they're actually scared of machine guns, but because they can't have one, and they don't know how to use one, and the idea of having to learn one is too difficult, so they don't want anybody else to have one. You know, it is the liberal mental illness, and it is fueled by envy. So be aware of that. Be very, very aware of that. Which is also why, you know, the saying, be as wise as serpents and as innocent as doves, is very important, because you need to be able to discern whom you share certain information with, and when and how. And that's not to be secretive, and that's not to be mysterious or anything like that. It's purely on the same level as why you wouldn't tell a total stranger that, you know, you've got 3 bars of gold in your house just sitting in your desk, you know, whatever. Again, another silly example, but you wouldn't go advertising that to the world. Why? Because there's a lot of people out there that have bad intentions. And the fact is, sometimes even the people close to you, even people that you might be related to or that you've been friends with for many years, will surprise you with the level of small-minded pettiness that they exhibit, and envy and jealousy. It's a weird thing. I always, one of the places that I saw that most often was in relationships, because I always had quite pretty women with me, whether I was married to them or whether they were just temporary entertainment or whatever. And I often saw the daggers of envy from those who just assumed, without knowing anything about me, that there would be better people or better men or whatever. And there are also the guys that feel so outclassed by that sort of thing, where they then try and become your friend, because then they sort of realize, oh, this guy knows something I don't know. And I don't mind those guys. And that's one of the places where you see it most obviously, but it can be anything. It can be in how many languages you speak. It can be in the amount of places you've traveled to. It can be in the number of books that you've read. It can be in the fact that you are, knowledgeable about a bunch of things, and then they'll try and pull you up on something, that their specific little thing that they consider themselves experts in. And it's really just a way for them to tell themselves, oh, but I'm better than him at this, and they might be, or they might not be. And sometimes, I've certainly had more than one occasion where a guy's exhibiting that, and I just let him be, even though at his own specialty, he actually wasn't as good as he thought he was, and actually knew more about it than he did. But I didn't care. It wasn't a matter to me, it's like, whatever. Of course, then there's the guys who try and cause you some kind of mental pain, or try and put you down, or try and make you look bad to fuel their own ego. And then those guys I punished. And I think so should you, if that happens. And it is a very much a gamma thing. There was a guy I banned recently from the YouTube comments who was making the usual gamma, hey, why are you aware of these guys, and don't you agree with them, and why? And it's why are you asking that? It's got nothing to do with you. It's got nothing to do with anything. And I've already answered the question. Yes, I'm aware of that group of people. So why does it keep insisting? Because it's not really a question. They're trying to undermine your position in one way or another by trying to sort of say, oh, you see, I've exposed this or I've exposed that. And no, you've exposed nothing other than you are a deceitful little sophist. So the interesting point of all this, coming back to the Neanderthal stuff, is that it might well be some kind of genetic malformation of a lower order being. Because in my estimation, you see, for example, I'm think of a whale, right? A whale is a mammal. It's got a huge brain, a massive brain. surely that amount of brain matter must be processing something. And we know that whales can communicate over thousands of kilometers of distance. Whale songs tend to be complicated, although we don't really know what they're doing or what they're saying. But it's almost like an alien, you know, like living in a different world. Obviously, they don't have fire because they're in the water all the time. But who knows? And I do believe, as Professor Michael Persinger, if you're interested in that, look for a video by Michael Persinger called No More Secrets. And it explains how telepathy works, which, by the way, has been tested in the lab now multiple times. There's meta-studies on it. Telepathy is a real thing. It works. And there are people who are capable of doing it on command to a certain extent. So, surely, if telepathy is a thing, and, you know, Neanderthals had a bigger brain, that doesn't necessarily mean that all Neanderthals were telepathic or anything like that. But it would tend to suggest that they might have had a more natural connection with the universal laws that might operate that would also answer how telepathy works, which, by the way, brings me around to thinking about Burkhard Heim. Burkhard Heim was a Nazi. Well, he worked in the Nazi era. I don't know if he was actually physically a Nazi, but he certainly created or invented some fuel air bombs and stuff that the Nazis definitely used in war. And he's the only guy that came up, as far as I know, with a theory of physics that includes consciousness. And if you include consciousness in your theory of physics, then you start to understand how Michael Persinger is talking about telepathy and how that works and so on. And there you start to understand why a bigger processing power of, say, a Neanderthal, or maybe even a whale, possibly could communicate over larger distances or have a more natural understanding of things. I don't think that anybody can say that Homo Sapiens is very in tune with his environment. Most of us live in cities now, or cut off from any kind of natural order of things. The rhythm of seasons, the rhythm of weather is pretty much lost for most of the world's population, other than the rural people who still live, you know, like our ancestors did a couple hundred years ago. So anyway, it's food for thought, and try not to be a Homo sapiens. Try to be a little bit more Neanderthal. Try to be a little bit more individualistic. Try to figure out how to avoid the slings and arrows of the typical, you know, zombies. And understand that, you know, maybe if you're just going along with the crowd and believing what everybody else believes, you're a bit more zombie than Neanderthal. Right, I've gone way overboard. I was supposed to do this for 10 minutes. It's now nearly 20, so good night.